The Great Fire of London. In 1666, a devastating fire swept through London, destroying 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, the Royal Exchange, Guildhall, and St. Paul's Cathedral.
So how did it happen? Back in the 1660s, people were not as aware of the dangers of fire as they are today. Buildings were made of timber, covered in a flammable substance called pitch, roofed with thatch, and tightly packed together with little regard for planning. About 350,000 people lived in London just before the Great Fire. It was one of the largest cities in Europe. Homes arched out over the street below, almost touching in places, and the city was buzzing with people. Lots of animals lived London, too. There were no cars, buses, or lorries back then. So as well as houses, the city was full of sheds and yards packed high with flammable hay and straw. Following a long, dry summer, the city was suffering a drought. Water was scarce and the wooden houses had dried out, making them easier to burn. It was a recipe for disaster. The Great Fire of London started on Sunday, 2nd September 1666, in a baker's shop on Pudding Lane, belonging to Thomas Fariner. Although he claimed to have extinguished the fire, 3 hours later at 1 a.m., his house was a blazing inferno. At first, few were concerned. Fires were such a common occurrence at the time. However, the fire moved quickly down Pudding Lane and carried on down Fish Hill and towards the River Thames. It spread rapidly, helped by a strong wind from the east. When it reached the Thames, it hit warehouses stocked with combustible products, including as oil and tallow. Fortunately, the fire didn't spread south of the river, but only because a major blaze in 1633 had already destroyed a section of London Bridge.
So how did they put out the Great Fire of London? Samuel Pepys, a man who lived at the time, kept a diary that has been well preserved. You can read it in full here. He was a clerk to the Royal Navy who observed the fire. He recommended to the king that buildings were pulled down. Many thought it was the only way to stop the fire. Pepys spoke to the Admiral of the Navy and agreed they should blow up houses in the path of the fire. The hope was that by doing this, they would create a space to stop the fire spreading from house to house. The Navy, which had been using gunpowder at the time, carried out the request, and the fire was mostly under control by Wednesday, 5th September 1666. However, small fires continued to break out, and the ground remained too hot to walk on for several days afterwards. Pepys recorded in his diary that even the king, Charles II, was seen helping to put out the fire.
What happened after the fire?
London had to be almost totally reconstructed. Temporary buildings were erected that were ill-equipped, disease spread easily, and many people died from this and the harsh winter that followed the fire. As well as loss of life, the financial costs were staggering. 13,200 houses, 87 parish churches, the Royal Exchange, Guildhall and St. Paul's Cathedral, built during the Middle Ages, was totally destroyed. The costs were estimated at £10 million.
Follow for more.